Well, let's talk about space stations since we're on the subject here. Let's talk about
Sure.
space stations. And I know that everybody has heard about the shuttle and the ISS, I guess it is, and different. Where they had Space Lab that was orbiting the Earth for a while. All these things that have been publicly known from NASA and so forth. Well, you've recently kind of come clean with me a little bit that you know a little bit more about that kind of thing than what the public generally knows about. And
Yeah, I think it's been long enough, and more and more people are talking, so I think I could talk a little more about it. And so I did share it with you off camera, and you asked me if I'd share it on camera, so that's fine. We've helped. I've worked on numerous space stations, and the main way they've been putting them up in the last 20 years is these space ladders or space elevators or space cables, and there are various places on the Earth that are no-fly zones, usually remote islands or very remote places, where they have a cable literally that goes all the way to outer space, and they say these are still theoretical, but we've actually been building them for 20 years roughly, and that's the main way. It's the heavy objects get hauled up like space stations. They don't. If you check what's officially reported payload capacity for the shuttle and how many shuttle missions we've had, you'll find out that there's no way even one or two space stations could have got built. And yet we know there's the average person probably knows there's 5 or 6 of them up there, but there's really more like 500 of them up there around Earth. There's some around the moon. There's some around the sun. There's some around Mars. And then there's bases on the moon and on Mars as well. And so there's a lot more space stations than people realize. And most of that stuff goes up with the space elevators. It's lifted with the space elevators. The space elevators climb these extremely strong cables that are made of carbon nanofibers and different types of polymers that they're working on, super strong stuff. And it's you can type it in. You'll see artists if you type in space. I think it's called space elevators is probably the common term now. But so you could also say space ladders. But put that in quotes and on Google search and hit images, and you'll see a whole bunch of these things. And there's literally elevators, and of course it's all presented as futuristic, not really using it yet, but they've been using them for about 20 years roughly. The ministry developed the carbon nanofibers back, probably 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago in that range. Ron Brandt and so on, and yeah, so it's interesting technology. It's very strong, extremely strong. They can lift the whole space station with this technology.
yeah, we're not talking we're not talking small space stations like Skylab or something. We're talking large space stations.
Big ones. I did get the privilege to go up in one, and we were testing it. It wasn't super high or anything. It was, like I say, I saw the curvature of the Earth pretty well, and we were testing it, and some interesting phenomena go on there. It was the kind that rotate, which most of them are. So you got artificial gravity, you got a centrifugal force, and then you have different levels. So your gravity might be 1/4 normal on the inner level, and then as you go out, it's more and closer to normal, 3/4 normal, and then it goes all the way to normal 1G, and then they even do 1.5G, or sometimes even a little more. But the outside is usually for exercise because you're heavier than normal. And so you'll have a jogging track, very common. The jogging track goes all the way around the outside, and you don't really know you're spinning because you're close, unless you see a window and you look out and you see the stars or you see the Earth going by. Then you get the sense that you're spinning, but otherwise you don't get the sense you're spinning. Interesting phenomena. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what is the diameter of these spinning things?
They vary, and of course the bigger diameter the slower they spin, because again you're limited. You can go up to 2G, but if it's more than two times gravity, it's hard for people to work. It's hard to get anything done. It's mostly machinery and stuff like that in the outer layers when you go up that high. Robots, I say machinery, forklifts that drive themselves, and people are driving them from the inner layers, remote controlled and stuff like that, because it puts a lot of stress on things too. So the various diameters, the biggest one I know of is about that humans have built and put up about 3/4 of a mile in diameter roughly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good size. It doesn't turn very fast either. It doesn't need to turn very fast. And that's the reason there's so much space junk. People wonder why there's so much space junk is because they've been putting these things up for 20 years, and when they don't need it anymore, or a bunch of rocks come by and destroy one, it blows up, or it just gets destroyed, and they abandon it. Well, it all becomes space junk, pieces everywhere, and nobody's out there cleaning that stuff up. And so these pieces are all in orbit around the Earth, and so that becomes a major issue now. In the last 10 years, they've been putting up Star Wars type weapons that they can use to shoot down space debris and evaporate it. It's a very high powered lasers they've got teams that's all they do is target particles that they think they can burn up and zap them and burn them up. I say particles. So sometimes big chunks of things that have been abandoned that are still floating around, and so that's one of the uses of the Star Wars tax. People got taxed and so on. Our taxes. I don't know. I guess our taxes don't go to that, but people think their taxes go to that. So.
Right. And these are all projects by the secret government or the shadow government and the shadow bankers. The bankers are ones that are doing all this, I guess.
Yeah, the bankers are all behind it, and now China's taken over the bankers, the whole banking system, and they're the ones that are cleaning house basically, and eventually all the bankers will have their clocks cleaned. Eventually it'll just be China running the whole financial system. Right now it's in that process, so I'd still say there's probably a few tens of thousands of bankers, but originally there were millions of bankers, and they've eliminated a lot of them, basically cleaning the house, if you want to say it that way, or however you want to say it. But yeah, those are the people that have been financing everything. And when I say finance, they invent, as we learned on the show previously, they give somebody a loan, 100,000, they invent 100 times that much, so they got 10 million all of a sudden. They don't know what to do with it. And then they'll con the government into borrowing that, and the government pays for all these space platforms, space stations, and all that. So the bankers become super rich, and then when the government borrows it, they probably multiply it again 100 times.
Probably so. Probably it's just a big Ponzi scheme.
It's fiction to start with, but it's fascinating to be on these things. One of the interesting effects when you're on the jogging track out there, let's say it's 1G gravity, for example, just to make it easy for people to think about, and you're jogging around the track, there's always a sign when you come to that level. There's always a sign that says uphill and downhill, because if you walk in one direction, even though it's all circle, you think there is no hill, but if you walk in one direction, you get lighter, and you walk in the other direction, you get heavier. So that's called the heavier direction is called uphill. That means you're actually moving. If you jog, you get even heavier. That means you're actually moving faster. You're rotating faster than normal, because you're jogging in that direction also. And you can significantly, people constantly trip until they get used to this kind of thing. So that's why they have these warning uphill and downhill, and they call it uphill and downhill. They call that direction uphill, that direction it has to do with which way you're spinning.
That's fascinating.
Inside of a big cylinder. If you go fast enough, obviously you can lose all your weight, because you're basically staying stationary from an outside perspective.
Right.
So your molecules tend to know where they are, no matter what's going on.
I mean, this sounds like stuff that's right out of a science fiction book that I used to read from Arthur C. Clarke. He talked about space elevators. He talked about big cylinders in orbit that would spin, so they'd have artificial gravity on the outside walls, and that's it's so weird, because that's probably when they were doing some of those things, or starting to do those things, when he wrote that stuff.
Yeah, and that's the way the new world order super it's like it. They like people to write fiction just as it's happening, and that way, if anybody talks, they just they'll usually say, well, the guy got old and he's senile now, and he's read that fiction book, or he saw that fiction movie and he thinks that's real. And
right.
And there's people out there probably listening to me right now saying the same thing. He saw that movie. Thinks it's real.
You got one of those big ice chunks hit you in the head, and now you think that you went into space or something. Well, see, you said a number of things on this program that I think were pretty amazing. One of the biggies that was pretty good was a number of shows back that you mentioned about working in some of these projects, and one of them was you worked next to a little gray ET guy. And so it's like, Well, if you're going to start talking like that, it doesn't surprise me that maybe you have been up on one of these things. And you also mentioned that they have them way out, but you tend to try to stay close to home. You don't like going. You don't want to go very far.
They've tried to get me to work off planet several times, a lot of our guys, and some of them have taken them up on it, and we never hear from them again. In other words, you might get 1 or 2 letters or 1 or 2 phone calls, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them anymore. I don't know what's going on out there, but it doesn't sound too good to me. It doesn't, I don't know if they can take them to Mars and make them a slave or something. Who knows? I don't know what's going on. Like I say, I just never felt good about it in my spirit. Ronald Brandt was offered to work off planet back in the 60s, so just to show you how far back this goes, that they've had bases and stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on off planet, and he was actually, they mentioned the moon and Mars specifically, that they needed somebody with his capabilities, on both those bases. They had bases on both, is what they told him. And so this has been going on a lot longer, and a lot of our ministers have been offered jobs off planet. They offer you huge amounts of pay, but if nobody ever hears from you again, you kind of wonder, what's really going on there. I mean, even their own families, even their own people that love their wives, love their kids, they never hear from them again. So they kind of wonder what's going on here. What's really going on.